Salve! I've been asked a lot what kind of equipment I used during this challenge and what originals I based it on. Many of the questions are along the lines of why are you not looking like I expected a Roman to look like? For reenactors familiar with late antiquity, this question is all too normal and we are very used to it. We of course know that the outfit of a Roman soldier in the 4th century doesn't correspond to the known cliches around the world anymore. Audiences around the world have been exposed to basically one type of look for a Roman soldier. And this one type of look corresponds approximately to the later half of the 1st century during the Flavian dynasty. This is what most people think a Roman soldier would look like during all of Rome's existence. Of course, that is not the case. We look at a state that had a state history of over 2,000 years, starting in the 700s BC and going all the way to the fall of Constantinople in 1453. During all this time, the Roman state was continuous, and during all this time, the Roman army evolved with the times. The Roman army of the 1st century had 300 years to develop until they formed the soldier of the 4th century. So of course, the soldier in the 4th century looks different and has different equipment from what a Republican Roman soldier would have worn, or what an early imperial Roman soldier would have worn, or what a Roman soldier of the crisis of the 3rd century would have worn and sported as an equipment. I will not go into detail now as to why these equipment changes took place. This will be something for another video in the future. I will go into detail as to which equipment I used in this challenge and why I chose it and how it performed. And so here we go. We start with the helmet. The helmet, as you see it here, is an Interkisa type helmet, which is a typology after a find spot on the Danube Limes in Hungary, where we found a lot of fragments of helmets from the 4th century, and they were all very similar, only being really different in decoration on the exterior. Now, there's a few things that are special about those helmets. This helmet here was found in Haditha in Syria. It's different from the Interkisa types because it does not have a ridge here, it has a band. So there's a few helmets from the 4th century that don't have a ridge, but have these kind of connecting bands. They're made from 2 halves, so you have 2 halves of a bowl and they're connected by a central band. Then you have this removable ridge, which is also from metal. There's 2 slits up here, and the ridge is inserted here, and then it's split down there inside of the helmet, and that's how it holds. But you could, if you wanted, kind of open that and remove the crest. And indeed, we have found also several helmets of this type where we found only the slits and no crest inside. We also found a few crests that were without any helmets attached to it. Notably, one that is gilded and very nice, which you can see in the museum in Carnuntum. Now, this helmet was only found in fragments. So here the Pusztalák brothers did a great job in proposing a reconstruction. Most of these helmets had an iron core and were sheathed with either silver or gold or bronze. And this sheathing would have intricate decorations like repoussé work or even stones and even gems sometimes. Now, this helmet is really nice to wear. I wear my Pannonian hat here, the Pileus Pannonicus, as an arming cap. It is made from rather thick sheep wool, dense sheep wool, and so it works quite well as an arming cap. However, during this experiment I found out that I will probably not use the Pileus Pannonicus anymore as an arming cap in the future. For the simple reason that no matter if I sweat it, or no matter the physical exercise level that I was subjected to, the fact that here this surface is very fluffy and there is some amount of heat obviously coming from my head, and then there is the cold metal surface on it, there is some condensation happening. No matter if you sweat or not, with this I found my helmet is always wet inside, which is obviously a problem which can cause corrosion after a while, and you always have to take care to take the helmet off every once in a while and swipe it out. So we have some finds of arming caps from several places in the Roman Empire from several centuries. They had also some sort of cheek flaps. So I think I will change to such an arming cap and have the Pileus Pannonicus exclusively as headwear. The next thing, of course, which is very important, the shoes. Here I have an excellent reconstruction of one of the so-called Ramshaw type shoes. If I remember correctly, there is 3 different types of them. This is one of them, and I think this is the Ramshaw 1 or 2. I have to look that up again. There's an excellent reconstruction made by a German shoemaker specialized on Roman shoes, Meister Knirim. I can only recommend his work. It's of astonishing quality. The leather quality, the proportions, and everything on this shoe is identical to the originals, as far as I can tell, having seen many original Roman shoes up close. Now, these shoes here are already 3 years old, and I've worn them extensively throughout the years. I've done a lot of marches with them on concrete, on all sorts of surfaces that are deteriorating their condition. However, this is still the original sole that came with it. As you can see, there's already a lot of hobnails missing. That's totally normal and to be expected. It's also easily repaired. However, the back of the sole here is already quite flat and walked out, so I think now it's time for a more general repair. The rest of the shoe is in perfectly fine condition, except for this wee protective flap over here, which I have ripped off while simulating a hunt, a late antique hunt in Brittany, and I was walking through really thick underwood, and some branches got caught in here and just ripped it off eventually. Before I go out into wintry or wet or icy conditions, I treat these shoes on the day before with pig fat, and then I let it sit and soak in overnight. Then just before walking out, I add another layer of fat. That usually holds pretty well. The older the shoes get, the more hobnails are missing, the less this trick will work. Yesterday it worked for about 4 hours that my feet were completely dry. An additional measure, of course, that every reenactment veteran or bushcrafter with historic gear will immediately tell you is straw. So of course I also put straw in the shoes. These shoes are a bit too big for me under normal conditions, when I just wear my Torspec trousers with feetlings, or when I just wear leg wraps and no socks. They are slightly too big for me. However, when I use the straw inside, they are the perfect size, and that is why I ordered them in this size, so that I have a really perfectly fit shoe for adverse conditions. When it's warmer, or when there is no frostbite to be expected, I prefer to walk in sandals actually, because they can get wet and your feet will dry much quicker. That's also one of the reasons why I am actually advocating for the late Roman army to be still using the caligae, the sandals, on marches, etc. And I think it is a bit of a habit of most reenactors to only use those, because we have mostly such shoes here of those types in the archaeological record, which is methodologically totally sound and fine, but we have a lot of iconography with soldiers using sandals, caligae. And I tend to be careful with the interpretation of iconography, especially in late antiquity, where we have a strong tendency of archaization, where people want to be depicted as their ancient heroes, so using more ancient and Greek equipment from early antiquity in order to be stylized like the heroes of their myths. However, I think this is a bit too simple an explanation. We find that they didn't only want to be depicted in such a way in many instances, but that they actually also dressed that way. So basically being reenactors already themselves. one more thing about the hobnails. There is something interesting to note. In late antiquity, in the archaeological record, we generally do not have the same amount of hobnails that we have from previous centuries in many areas. However, in Britain, for example, we find in several spots quite a few of them. So it's hard to say there were no hobnails used anymore in the 4th century and it was a total decline. What we can say from the archaeological record is that yes, they get less. We find less of them. It's an indication that maybe they were less used. We also find more types of shoes that don't use them. So there was certainly a decline. Maybe it had to do with fashion, maybe it had to do with shortages. We don't know. The next piece of equipment are my trousers. So here you can see my replica of the Torsberg trousers. They are with attached feetlings, look a bit like pajamas to many modern eyes. They are made from wool. Here I used the diamond weaving pattern, which is the same as in the original Torsberg trousers, of which there are two, and one of them is completely also in diamond weave. They are dyed naturally. They are dyed with woad, and this gives this nice blue color which we see a lot of Roman soldiers in iconography sporting. So this is not just my own fashion choice that these trousers are blue. This is indeed something that we see a lot in iconography. It's not the only color that Roman soldiers would wear on their trousers, but it is, as far as I could tell from extensive research into all available iconography of the period, is by far the most common color that soldiers sport, blue. At least for the start of the 4th century, up until the second half of the 4th century, where increasingly the color white also gets popular, and we see also red pants. How did they hold up? Very well, I have to say. They kept me warm. It's a nice feeling to have your pants and your socks tied together, actually, because you always feel like your pants are nicely stretched and there's nothing coming in between your pants and your socks, like snow, for example, where the camera team that went with me with modern equipment sometimes struggled with snow getting into their shoes, between their pants and their shoes. That was a problem I actually didn't have. Even if snow got into my shoes, it didn't get between my trousers and my socks and my legs, which is very uncomfortable. I have also a second pair of pants that I use when it's really cold. Basically the same model. It's the Torsberg cut again, with those belt loops as we see it also on the original and on some iconography, and also the feet again that are attached. Now this, if you look closely, is a very thick weave. It's hand woven in Siberia. It's the same fabric as my winter cloak, and it holds extremely warm, and it holds up to wetness, it holds up to moisture pretty well up until a certain point. The only disadvantage I see with them is that once they are wet, they stay wet for quite a long time. They take a hell of a long time to dry completely. And so it's always a bit of a gamble. Do I use the blue pants, which are a bit thinner but that dry also quicker, or do I use the thick pants, the green pants? Olive green is also a color that we see quite often. Which one do I choose depends a lot on the temperature. When it's very cold and the snow is kind of dry and not really melting, then I would choose the thicker pants. But when the snow is quite wet and it's rather warmer, like yesterday, then I would definitely go for the blue pants. Of course, then we have the iconic red tunic. Now you will say, this doesn't look red, this looks brown or orange or brick colored or whatever. Yes, it does, because why? This has been worn extensively and it just faded. This is made from wool as well, and is also dyed with madder, and depending on how you dye with madder, you get different results, from a very bright red, very deep red if you color several times, to actually just brown or even orange. So this is more on the orange side, no problem. We see that as well in iconography, and it is just a natural result. Again, Roman soldiers do wear red tunics quite a lot. So this tunic is made according to the cut of several originals that we have from Egypt. You can see it's quite wide and it has very slim arms. It has also something else that bewilders most people. It has slits under the aisles, under the arms. We see that a lot in 4th century iconography, that people could just put their arms out of the sleeves and have the dangling sleeves then tied to a knot behind your neck, so that you have your arms free, or if it's hot, that you can just work without the arms. So this is basically two pieces in one. You can have a sleeveless tunic and you can have a tunic with sleeves. It's pretty ingenious. Now this tunic I have worn now for 14 days every day underneath the armor. I wanted to see also what happens in terms of coloring, in terms of getting stained and dirty, and where the armor would deteriorate the tunic. So what I found now in those 14 days is that there's certain notorious spots that just got blackened by the armor, like here close to the neck and on the elbows and forearms, where my sub armor wouldn't always cover the tunic, and sometimes the chainmail arm would just touch the tunic, and there, as you can maybe see here, the tunic got darker and blackened. Now I will also try and wash this tunic, not with modern means, but trying to source out a few historic means of washing it and see what happens to the coloring. Again, this used to be much more red or orange when I got it new, and it's now much more brick shaped, going into light brown. So I will see how this affects the natural dye when I wash it now, and I presume that they have to be washed relatively often when you are going around in armor daily. I didn't wear any linen undertunic here now because in winter I found it to be not really useful. Linen, when you sweat into it, it takes a while to dry, and then you have a wet shirt that feels really bad on your skin all the time. Here I was sweating into this woolen tunic quite a lot, and it dried quite fast. I never had an uncomfortable feeling of staying sweaty and of cold sweat. However, when I wear linen under tunic, this is often the case, which is why I would prefer to wear the linen under tunic in, for example, a more arid, a more hot climate, or in summer, or in the Mediterranean, where this effect is certainly of use. Then here we come to my belt. Now this belt, Reconstruction, is temporary for me. It follows loosely the typical forms, the typology that we have in Pannonia a lot, and also in the Rhineland actually, with those little tubes here, with this type of buckle and the typical propeller stiffeners. So this type would be around, certainly around the mid-4th century, and that'd be very popular in different areas of the empire. Also very typical, those strap ends here. However, this exact belt, this assembly, wasn't found exactly like this. This is just an ideal, typical reconstruction that takes up several elements from several grave finds. Now, I'm not a big fan of that. However, I have my new belt coming up. I will make a separate video about that belt. It will be likely one of the most authentically reconstructed belts in the world in terms of late antiquity reenactment. It will be absolutely stunning, It will be the exact replica of an assembly that we found near my own hometown at the garrison of Asturias, which today is Zwentendorf, and there is a grave number 57, and we have this complete assembly reconstructed. Now, with most late antique belt reconstructions that we have today in the reenactment, there's different interpretations of how and where to fix the certain elements. For example, these tubes here, or we don't know exactly what those little rings here are for. I have interpreted that here now as a place where I could fix a utility knife, for example. So there's a lot of speculation still going on. We're trying out certain things. We're looking at different things. For example, also here, this belt is, for example, made from a thick cow leather. However, most leather finds in military context that we make are actually relatively thin goat leather, and also most military belt fragments where the leather is still there that we found are from goat leather. In iconography, we see that most of these belts sported by soldiers are the cingulum are red, so that's very nicely naturally dyed here, as will be my new belt. Talking about belts and knives attached to them, here is a typical knife. Looks very peculiar. It has this kind of fish form. It's very broad. This is the reconstruction of a find associated also to my grave context that I'm reconstructing. Such a knife was part of the panoply and was found in direct proximity to the belt in such a position. If the belt was here on the body, then the knife was just in such a position underneath, which reflects quite nicely the way I've reconstructed it here with hanging from the belt. Of course, to a knife belongs also a stone for sharpening and somewhere where to store your food, transport it, and also cook it. So these type of little pots here, we have a lot of them from many different places, and we find them in the contexts of many different centuries. There's one exactly like this at the museum in Carnuntum. Now, it was found in the early days of archaeology, so we don't know the exact context. We can't say if this is from an earlier century or from late antiquity. However, in other places we have such pots from a late antique 4th century context. Now, what do you have inside of this? It's an interpretation from me. My marching kit is not completed yet because we don't have a lot of iconography in the 4th century showing soldiers on the march. I presume that the marching kit stayed quite the same over those centuries, and pretty much a soldier in late antiquity would use something very similar from the system with the furka, etc., like they had in previous centuries. There is no good reason to assume that they needed to change that system. It was a winning system. It was sufficient to all the requirements of the army back then, and so I don't think that they actually modified that much. And finding such pots also in late antiquity speaks for this hypothesis. So now what do I have in here for now? Some linen cloths to protect the food from moisture and also to wrap it inside, and some linen bag where I keep the buccellatum, which needs to stay dry because otherwise it will mold. Yes, and then I can use this pot for all sort of other things. Cooking, it's very versatile. On some days you would have seen me sport these sort of socks, udones. Now they are made from wool and they largely correspond to the pattern that we have on the trousers as well. So they're basically the feetlings without the trousers. They work quite well as well, just like the feetlings, and they're white, and I've exposed them to quite a bit of straw, of the leather being dirty, etc. And it shows they are, of course, a bit more dirty, and I haven't even washed them yet after all the expedition, but they're still white and not totally black and totally stained. So I think after a bit of washing and a bit of treating it with maybe some chalk, they're just as fine and white as always. We see a lot of iconography again with Roman soldiers wearing those kind of white socks. We have some finds from Egypt with socks that are in the Coptic stitch that are in many colors and all the sorts of rainbow colors, etc. However, those are not really clearly found in an army or a soldier's context. Soldiers we often see really depicted with white socks, so that's why I wear white socks. It's not just because I like Michael Jackson. Now, another very important and essential element that we've already talked about in episode 6 of my challenge are those leg wraps here with the 2 ropes attached so that you can wrap them around your legs. Very easy to use. Now, the next item I want to present to you are the fibulas that I used for this experiment. I used 2 different types. They're both in the family of the crossbow fibulas, which were the predominant military and later also high official fibulas in late antiquity. We have a lot of iconography showing them, and we find them literally everywhere. As soon as you dig one of them up, you know exactly what the archaeological context is, and mostly they help us also pretty well with dating, because these were mass products. These were not just made by like skilled artisans in a small corner with like many local variants, etc. There were local variations. There is a progression of the style through time, but these are literally mass products, and we find them littered over a vast surface of the empire everywhere. Now, the earlier type is here. This one was found in Deurne in the Netherlands, where there's also a spectacular helmet that was found wrapped in a leather bag, which I will also get pretty soon by Ex Limite Australis, and some leather sheets and some other items, and notably this fibula, which I have a replica of. Now, if I'm not totally mistaken, this should belong to the Keller type 2B, which is mainly in use in the early 4th century, probably around the 320s, 330s, in this area. My second fibula type is of a later type. This should be a type 4. This is probably the most commonly found fibula all over the place, at least in my region. In most Roman museums that hold late antique findings, you would come across not one but several of these in this very same pattern, very same size, everything completely the same. Now, they have also a very wide time span during which they were used, going from the first half of the 4th century, probably around the 330s, 340s, until the later 4th century, so going well into the 370s, 380s, if I'm not totally mistaken. They are rather on the smaller end of the spectrum. There's very big ones as well. However, we think that the size played a role also in identifying rank and importance of the person sporting it. So, of course, me as a small garrison soldier, maybe commander of a small unit on Limes fort on the Danube, I would not be in possession of a really big and highly ornate gilded or silver fibula, but I would be in possession of one of these mass artifacts. However, I have one luxury item. We have a few of them also in the museum in Carnuntum. A silver spoon. This is a typical spoon and has a typical form in late antiquity. Sometimes they have even like little kairos, little chrismons carved into them. I use this, I really like it. I have one from wood as well, which would probably be more likely for a soldier of my stature in campaign mode as well. However, I just prefer eating with that one for now, but I'd rather in the display use the wooden one. Here is my little bag where I store some of the ceramics that I used. Now, I probably wouldn't take any ceramics with me on campaign, and this wouldn't likely be soldiers' standard campaign wear, because ceramics break easily, especially these ancient ceramics. These are excellent replicas, also from the area, also from fine contexts very near to my home on the Danube, and they're even made from the very similar clay. So here's a typical Faltenbecher, and those plates that you've seen in the previous episodes. What would a soldier have to eat out of? Possibly wooden plates. I doubt that it would be ceramics, because sure as hell those break on campaign very easily. You just have to watch out all the time. If you bump your luggage somewhere, if you've dropped your luggage, these break, and what do you do then? Nothing. So, and they're heavy, they're really heavy, and so I think some wooden bowls, some wooden cups are really what we can speculate with. I've also a larger cooking spoon here from wood, just to be able to do some cooking with my little pot. Here is the fire starter kit with several types of fire starters, notably a very exotic one that was found on the Rhine. There's even several ones of those found on the Rhine, and they portray a little ship. So they have this little ship here, and something that's like a little axe. It's sharp, and you can actually cut some stuff or like prepare something, and it has also a thorn here at the back that you can use for striking, or you can use to clean something out or to manipulate. So it's a nice versatile tool, and I'd like to imagine that Ripenza soldiers, because it has been found in proximity of the Rhine and of, I think also the Danube even, I have to check that out again, would fancy themselves with such a little thing here that portrays a boat. Yesterday in the snow I was also wearing these. These are not sourced. We have nothing that indicates that such gloves were in use in the Roman army at the time. However, it seemed to me we have gloves from just a century later, and this is the easiest thing to do. Now, this is just sheepskin. It's just sewn together from sheepskin. The fur is still inside. They kept me extraordinarily warm. They're not waterproof because I haven't smeared them in with fat, because when I have fat all over my hands, then I have fat all over my stuff. So I preferred to just have them like that, and try to not have them too wet by grabbing the wet snow all the time. This of course failed miserably, because I literally had to crawl through wet snow, and they were consistently all the time submerged in relatively wet snow. So after a while they got wet, but the wetness didn't transpire through to my hands, because there was quite a thick layer of wool still between me and the wet leather surface. The sword I carry is made specially for historicizing sports fencing. So that means it's not sharp, it's blunt, and it has a blunt tip, as you can see. This is for safety reasons, so that we can fence and fight according to modern sport rules that try to be historicizing, but are not ultimately the exact same as the historic fencing and fencing trainings. And it's also heavier than original swords would have been, because of its thickness for the sports purposes. It has a grip that is based on finds that we have from Scandinavia. These grips seem to have been quite a norm and a standard in the 4th century, very, very typical apparently. We have several indications that many swords would have had such a grip, and that grips would have been predominantly from material that would waste away very quickly in the earth, like horn or wood. So this is a wooden handle. It's extremely nice to hold and grip. I have a lot of control over it, and it doesn't need to be any more fancy than this, especially because I noticed that when I'm walking with no protective surcoat over my chainmail, everything that rubs against it deteriorates or gets like roughed off. So for example, the scabbard here, you can see quite roughed up by the chainmail, by like moving against it all the time, and so is the wooden handle at the top. It's gotten quite black, and the wood is taking some hits So what this teaches me certainly is that when being a simple soldier wearing chainmail all the time and running around with it, most stuff that I carry on it will get deteriorated in some way. So I either wear a protective surcoat, which we have in several textual sources, some hints that this would have been done, or even some recommendations that this should be done. And certainly after this experience, that's something I will do, because I see no point in having my chainmail basically destroy everything I wear on top of it. So certainly this sort of surcoat over the chainmail, which I will probably make from leather, will happen, and I will present it in a future video. How did I stay hydrated? Well, I used this ceramic flask. It holds a bit more than 2 liters and is very handy. It's coated inside with molten beeswax, which has the additional effect of being antiseptic. I mostly drank Posca out of this, not just water, but Posca, which is a very energizing drink. It has vitamin C inside from the vinegar, it has some sugar inside from the honey, some sweetness as an energy booster. It has some salt inside for when you sweat a lot, you're lacking electrolytes, etc. And the salt is helping with that. And then of course for taste it has also some herbs inside. It tastes really fresh. You need to get the mix between the vinegar and the water right. I'll make another video about that and about the different ways of making Posca and the different sources we have for it. However, here's the deal with this. We don't have so many finds of this for the 4th century, especially not in a military context. As mentioned previously, I'm very skeptical about the extensive use of ceramics in a military baggage train and context. We have so-called pilgrim flasks from the 4th century, which are basically in this basic shape and outline. We have some finds from Egypt and also, I believe, from Turkey. These pilgrim flasks are associated indeed with pilgrimage. Mostly there's some Christian symbology or mythology on them. I had so far no problems with this flask. Now, what would likely have been used by Roman soldiers in the 4th century? I believe something very similar to in previous centuries. As we have no metal founds of such metal flasks, and I believe that these flasks absolutely need to be having a standard volume, because if just anybody rocks up with flasks of various sizes, some people get just much more provisions than others. They just go there and say like, I'll fill it up, and this contains maybe 4 liters, and somebody else contains only 2 liters. So no, there needs to be a standardization for the rations. There needs to be a standard size, and so a standard product. Some people argue that probably soldiers would have just used a European pumpkin variant as a gourd, which is totally possible, and we have some evidence that these gourds from European pumpkins were indeed extensively used in the kitchen and in cooking areas for certain things. However, I don't think that this was a solution for the army because of varying sizes, of course, and because this does not work for an army. They need to have really similar sizes, standardized sizes. The next best guess would be leather containers. For that we have some evidence from early centuries, and it's still done today. Leather containers, well prepared, expertly prepared, are excellent storage for liquids, and they can be transported easily, and when you bump them against something, they are not breaking so easy. You have to really pierce them. So I'm waiting for my own version of such a leather container, but until then I will use this. It's a little bit protected by the ropes around here. However, don't take this as historic truth. I don't think that a Roman soldier would actually have been running around with such a ceramic flask. Right, so here's a brief overview over some parts of my gear. About the cloak, I talked already in an earlier video. This is only a part of my panoply. This is really specifically what I've been using the last 14 days, and for this simple Repentant Soldier challenge. Thanks very much for your attention in this very long explanation and showcase of my equipment for this challenge. If you have any specific questions, please write them in the comments or visit also our Facebook page, Project Quarto de Kimani. You can also find us on Instagram under Quarto de Kimani or The Age of Arthur. We will also be very happy about your support on Patreon, as all of this costs a lot of money, and the more authentic an experience we want to generate and the more authentic material and replicas we want to present, the more everything gets expensive. We are doing all this on our own purses, of course. We have so far no subsidies, no support by any museums or official government bodies, and we rely entirely on the support of those people who are fascinated by history and want to learn more about late antiquity, and who just want to see us performing more and more of those sort of challenges and experiments. We will release more things also on Patreon. We will certainly dive more into the intricacies of the material, of the replicas, the typologies, and have a more scientific discussion. How to come up with more and more detailed and interesting and lifelike simulations of life and equipment in late antiquity. You can ask us specific questions, and we will have some polls coming up and make some videos especially dedicated to your questions.